My name is Piper, a 32-year-old regional manager sitting across from those who were supposed to protect me. This warm holiday gathering instantly turned into a suffocating interrogation as my father delivered a ruthless ultimatum regarding my financial independence. He looked me dead in the eye, stating, "We will keep 50% of your salary. Accept it, and stay or step out of this house." Maintaining complete composure, I looked directly at him to ask, "I understand. When will this decision take effect?" My mother sat right next to him, wearing a triumphant smirk, as she firmly declared, "Immediately." I simply nodded before carefully placing a small red velvet gift box right in the center of the dining table. I calmly put on my winter coat to walk straight out the front door into the heavy snowfall, leaving behind their bewildered stares. About 30 minutes later, my cousin called me in a sheer panic to report that my parents were completely losing their minds. He frantically explained how they were destroying the living room furniture right after opening that mysterious present. Before I dive deeper into this explosive night, please take a brief moment to share in the comments where you are watching from today. I truly want to know how far my story is traveling. So please remember to like this video, subscribe, or click the notification bell. 6 months before that dinner, the front door to this lake house in Minneapolis served as my only lifeline when my life hit absolute rock bottom. Following a devastating divorce settlement and an unexpected corporate layoff, I found myself completely stripped of my personal savings while desperately needing a safe place to stay. I had to swallow my pride and formally ask my father Gary, along with my mother Sharon, for permission to move temporarily back into my old childhood bedroom. They initially presented themselves as generous saviors, offering a warm sanctuary during my darkest hour of need. However, the exact moment I successfully secured a lucrative position as a regional manager, their supportive demeanor instantly morphed into blatant and unapologetic entitlement. Believing I owed them a massive debt of gratitude for their hospitality, I proactively took over all the household utility bills without ever being asked. I also made it a consistent habit to fill their refrigerator with premium groceries every single week, to tangibly demonstrate my deep appreciation for their shelter. Observing my growing financial stability along with my willingness to contribute, they quickly realized they had found the perfect opportunity to exploit my lingering guilt. Both of my parents suddenly claimed they were suffering from vague physical ailments that conveniently required them to retire from their jobs several years ahead of schedule. This highly calculated decision abruptly transformed me into their sole source of income, while they fully expected to maintain their previously comfortable suburban lifestyle. Their financial demands escalated rapidly from basic living expenses to an entirely parasitic existence that actively drained my bank accounts at the end of every month. Dad cornered me in the kitchen one evening to insist that I must assume full responsibility for the annual property taxes and the expensive homeowner insurance premiums. He shamelessly argued that since I was living under their roof, rent-free, covering these massive annual bills was the bare minimum I could do to support them. When I tried to gently explain that those specific bills would consume a significant portion of my remaining income, Mom immediately stepped in to manipulate the situation. She loudly reminded me of all their sacrifices to raise me, while emphasizing how selfish I sounded for questioning their financial needs during their supposed health crisis. To avoid further conflict within the household, I agreed to take on the property taxes while quietly canceling my own gym membership and streaming subscriptions. While I worked exhausting 60-hour weeks managing regional sales territories to cover these mounting obligations, they spent their days lounging at luxury spas or aimlessly wandering through high-end shopping malls. They carelessly swiped the secondary credit cards I had originally provided them strictly for emergency medical purposes, accumulating thousands of dollars in designer clothing and expensive restaurant dinners. Whenever the monthly credit card statements arrived in the mail, I would find numerous charges for luxury golf club fees and expensive cosmetic treatments that had absolutely nothing to do with their claimed medical conditions. Mom would often invite her wealthy friends over for extravagant catered luncheons, casually passing the massive catering invoices directly to me while telling her guests about my successful career. Instead of expressing any gratitude for my continuous financial support, they began treating me exactly like a live-in employee whose only purpose was to fund their permanent vacation. They would frequently leave passive-aggressive notes on the kitchen counter, demanding that I hire a professional landscaping service because the yard work was supposedly too strenuous for their fragile bodies. Every single boundary I attempted to establish was met with intense emotional manipulation that left me feeling completely trapped within the very walls that were supposed to protect me. I found myself working late into the night just to keep my head above water while my parents actively schemed to extract every dollar from my paycheck. 1 month before the Christmas dinner, their greed became so painfully obvious that I began questioning everything happening around me. The outrageous demands for additional cash from my parents suddenly skyrocketed with countless absurd excuses that made absolutely no logical sense. Mom started claiming she desperately needed thousands of dollars to invest in some exclusive virtual stock market opportunity that she learned about from her wealthy friends. She would aggressively guilt-trip me whenever I hesitated by claiming that her lucrative investment would eventually secure their long-term retirement plans. Meanwhile, Dad would frequently demand large sums of money to allegedly repair expensive household appliances that were working perfectly fine just the day before. He even went as far as presenting me with a fabricated handwritten invoice from a supposed repairman who never actually visited our property. The breaking point occurred during a rare weekend when my best friend Chloe came over to visit me after my grueling business trip. Chloe had known my family since we were teenagers, but she had never witnessed them treating me with such blatant disrespect in her presence. She sat on the kitchen stool watching in absolute shock as my parents continuously ordered me around the house like an unpaid domestic servant. They demanded that I immediately cook them a gourmet meal, while simultaneously doing their heavy laundry without offering a single word of gratitude. Chloe quickly grabbed my arm to pull me into the hallway where she urgently whispered, "Do you realize they are completely draining your energy since you are certainly not their personal gold mine?" I looked at her with exhausted eyes as I replied, "I know I am feeling that something very wrong is happening right inside this house." My lingering suspicions officially reached their absolute peak when I accidentally discovered a stack of disturbing documents hidden deep inside the living room sofa. While vacuuming the cushions one Saturday morning, I pulled out several overdue payment notices from unfamiliar financial institutions that I had never seen before. I carefully unfolded the crumpled papers with trembling hands to read the terrifying collection warnings, demanding immediate restitution for debts I knew nothing about. The official letters were marked with urgent red stamps threatening immediate legal action for massively delinquent accounts that were somehow registered to this residential address. Adding to my growing anxiety, I started noticing Dad frequently sneaking out onto the back porch late at night to make secretive phone calls. Standing near the kitchen window in the dark, I could hear his tone sounding incredibly submissive and groveling to whoever was on the other line. This cowardly behavior was completely different from the bossy and patriarchal attitude he constantly displayed while barking ridiculous orders at me inside the house. Through the slightly opened glass door, I distinctly heard him pleading with dangerous individuals to extend his payment deadlines for just one more week. He would beg the mysterious callers for more time while desperately promising that a large sum of cash would be transferred to them very soon. My strong intuition loudly warned me that something incredibly shady was actively unfolding behind my back while I was busy working to support them. Connecting the hidden overdue notices with his terrifying late-night phone calls made my blood run completely cold with a sudden terrifying realization. I realized they might be using my stable income to cover up a massive financial disaster that they had secretly created without my knowledge. Instead of storming into their bedroom to demand immediate answers, Right then, I chose a much more strategic approach to protect my own future. I knew that confronting pathological liars without possessing concrete, undeniable evidence would only result in them aggressively manipulating me into feeling completely crazy. Wanting to uncover the absolute truth before confronting them, I firmly decided to secretly investigate my entire Social Security records and comprehensive credit history. Exactly 3 weeks later, I firmly decided to personally tear apart the thick veil of lies covering this entire house. I received a highly detailed investigation report from my recently hired lawyer, Mrs. Ford, which finally confirmed my absolute worst nightmares regarding my parents. She urgently called me during my corporate lunch break to deliver the devastating news about my completely ruined financial status. Mrs. Ford bluntly informed me over the phone, "They used your Social Security number to open 6 different credit cards, while the current debt exceeds all imagination." Hearing those terrifying words made my blood boil as I realized they had gambled away my entire future at illegal underground casinos located just outside the city limits. The massive stack of official documentation clearly proved they had been forging my signature on various loan applications for several months without showing any signs of stopping. Gripping the steering wheel of my parked car, I coldly replied to her, "Please prepare all the legal files for me, because it is time to put an end to this terrible situation." Facing this massive mountain of bad debt that fell from the sky, I successfully suppressed my extreme rage to focus entirely on my personal survival. Instead of screaming or confronting them with the undeniable evidence of their massive betrayal, I quietly drove downtown to sign a long-term lease agreement for a high-security apartment. This luxurious city center building featured strict access controls with armed security guards stationed at the front desk around the clock to prevent unwanted visitors from entering the premises. Securing this safe haven gave me the immense psychological strength needed to execute my carefully calculated exit strategy without raising any suspicious alarms at home. Every single morning before heading off to my corporate office, I discreetly packed my most important legal documents, including my birth certificate and recent tax returns. I systematically smuggled these irreplaceable items alongside my essential professional clothing out of the house by hiding them underneath my heavy gym equipment inside my vehicle. To ensure my stealthy departure remained completely undetected, I made absolutely sure to leave my childhood bedroom looking exactly the same by replacing the removed items with empty cardboard boxes. My parents were so completely absorbed in their parasitic lifestyle that they never noticed the gradual disappearance of my personal belongings right under their noses. Rather than staging a dramatic confrontation immediately after discovering their massive betrayal, I maintained absolute silence while living peacefully under the same roof. I stealthily went online to officially redirect all my personal mail, along with my sensitive banking correspondence, directly to my newly rented downtown address. Once my incoming mail was securely rerouted, I systematically contacted the fraud departments of various financial institutions to permanently lock down every single compromised credit card. Cutting off their illicit money sources behind the scenes required immense self-control, while I continued smiling at them across the dinner table every single evening. During my final days living in that toxic environment, I meticulously prepared a beautiful small box wrapped in elegant red velvet paper to serve as my ultimate parting gift. I carefully placed several deadly surprises inside this innocent-looking package, including the forged credit card statements and the drafted legal notices from my lawyer. After tying a perfect golden ribbon around the exterior, I securely hid this explosive present deep inside my car trunk to prevent any accidental discovery by my snooping mother. I patiently waited for the upcoming Christmas dinner to finally deliver this ultimate consequence to the people who had shamelessly exploited my unconditional love for their own selfish financial gain. That Christmas night, the dining room was magnificently decorated to cover up the rotten hypocrisy of the people sitting around the table. The sparkling holiday lights and expensive pine garlands hanging above the fireplace severely contrasted with the incredibly toxic environment they had intentionally created. We were surrounded by a lavish holiday feast, featuring expensive catered dishes that were undoubtedly purchased using my compromised personal credit cards. My parents happily raised their expensive crystal wine glasses to toast each other, while enthusiastically performing their perfectly scripted play of a warm and loving family. They sat there smiling brightly while ruthlessly planning to continue spending the hard-earned money that I had desperately worked 60-hour weeks to acquire. The festive holiday atmosphere abruptly shifted into absolute tension when Dad completely changed his facial expression from joyful to strictly authoritarian. He deliberately tapped his silver fork against his empty wine glass to command everyone's immediate attention before delivering his terrifying financial ultimatum. He stared directly across the roasted turkey to coldly announce his tyrannical intention of confiscating exactly half of my monthly corporate salary. He arrogantly framed this massive financial extortion as an obvious and mandatory repayment for generously providing me with a temporary bedroom during my previous unemployment crisis. Dad leaned forward to growl menacingly across the table. "We will keep 50% of your salary, so you either accept it and stay or step out of this house." Maintaining my absolute composure, I looked straight into his eyes and calmly asked, "I understand your terms perfectly, but when will this decision take effect?" Mom smirked triumphantly from her seat while crossing her arms as she proudly declared, "This new financial arrangement will begin immediately." Rather than wasting my breath arguing or crying over their manipulative behavior, I kept my completely peaceful demeanor intact. I simply smiled while nodding my head in apparent agreement before reaching into my coat pocket to retrieve my ultimate parting gift. I carefully placed the beautiful red velvet gift box containing the devastating truth about their secret gambling debts right in the center of the dining table. Without waiting for them to open the package or process my strange reaction, I turned my back and walked straight out the front door. Stepping away from that incredibly toxic environment into the freezing winter snowstorm instantly flooded my mind with an immense feeling of absolute freedom. Exactly 30 minutes after my peaceful departure, my cousin Owen frantically called my cell phone while I was driving toward my newly rented downtown apartment. His voice was violently trembling as he vividly recounted the chaotic scene unfolding back at the house after they finally opened my velvet box. He breathlessly explained that Dad was aggressively smashing the living room furniture into tiny pieces while furiously throwing his empty wine glass against the brick fireplace. Meanwhile, Mom was reportedly screaming in pure panic while frantically tearing up the forged credit card statements and legal notices that exposed their massive financial crimes. Right after Owen quickly ended our phone call to seek safety upstairs, my cell phone screen began lighting up continuously with dozens of incoming notifications. I received a massive flood of desperate missed calls and increasingly threatening text messages from both of my parents demanding my immediate return. Instead of answering their frantic attempts to regain their lost control over my life, I simply pressed the block button on all of their contact numbers. Watching their incoming messages completely disappear from my phone screen brought me an indescribable sense of permanent peace and emotional clarity. Driving through the quiet, snowy streets toward my secure new home, I felt incredibly relieved, knowing that their parasitic reign over my finances was permanently terminated. A few days after the incident, the peaceful tranquility of my newly rented downtown apartment was abruptly interrupted when they unexpectedly appeared right in the main lobby of my building. My parents had somehow managed to successfully track down my confidential residential address by persistently harassing my former corporate colleagues over the phone. Walking through the revolving glass doors after a long, exhausting day at the office, I suddenly found them physically blocking my direct path toward the secure residential elevators. They immediately launched into a highly theatrical public performance featuring pathetic fake tears while loudly begging for my absolute forgiveness in front of the deeply confused security guards. Mom dramatically clutched her chest while desperately claiming that their massive financial mistakes were simply desperate survival actions driven by their severe, undiagnosed health anxieties. Observing my completely stone-cold facial expression, they quickly realized that their emotional manipulation tactics were utterly failing to soften my deeply hardened resolve. Seeing that I possessed absolutely zero intention of returning to my previous miserable role as their personal human ATM machine, their pitiful parental masks completely slipped off their faces. Their fake hysterical sobbing instantly evaporated into thin air to be rapidly replaced by a terrifying display of frantic and uncontrollable raging anger right there in the lobby. They immediately flipped their narrative from playing the desperate victims to becoming highly aggressive attackers while causing a massive public scene that attracted the attention of my new neighbors. Dad aggressively pointed his trembling index finger directly at my face, while loudly threatening to initiate brutal legal proceedings against me to drain my remaining savings. He gritted his teeth, while menacingly threatening in front of everyone present in the lobby. "If you do not return to pay the mortgage, I will take this matter to court because you have a legal obligation to support us, Niore." I firmly pushed his hand away from my personal space while stating clearly, "Go ahead and call your lawyer, but do not forget the documents I left inside that box on that night." The professional building security personnel quickly intervened to physically escort both of my loudly screaming parents completely off the private commercial premises to restore the peaceful environment. Later that exact same evening, Mom blatantly escalated her vindictive retaliation by publishing a massive, tearful manifesto across all of her various social media profiles. She deliberately twisted the actual reality of our complex financial situation to publicly smear my professional reputation with incredibly malicious and entirely fabricated accusations. Her lengthy viral post intentionally portrayed me as a wealthy but cold-blooded unfilial daughter who cruelly abandoned her sick biological parents to starve during the freezing winter season. Within a few hours of her highly dramatic online publication, my personal inbox became completely flooded with highly abusive messages from completely clueless, distant relatives. These ignorant family members continuously bombarded my personal cell phone with hateful text messages, demanding that I immediately apologize for my supposedly terrible and selfish behavior. Choosing to completely ignore their highly toxic digital harassment, I absolutely refused to waste my valuable emotional energy defending my honorable character on any public internet forums. Instead of engaging in a pointless online screaming match with completely delusional people, I just sat quietly at my kitchen island, taking precise digital screenshots of every single slanderous comment. I meticulously compiled all of this highly defamatory digital evidence into a secure, encrypted folder to quickly forward directly to Mrs. Ford to strengthen our upcoming legal defense strategy. This coordinated digital smear campaign simply provided me with additional concrete proof regarding their inherently toxic nature to present before the presiding judge. 4 months after those hostile public threats, I confidently walked through the heavy wooden doors of the county courtroom with meticulous legal preparation while keeping my head held incredibly high. Taking my assigned seat next to Mrs. Ford at the defense table, I maintained absolute emotional control while completely ignoring the intimidating glares coming directly from the opposing side. I refused to let their pathetic display of fake parental suffering affect my steady breathing while waiting for the official legal proceedings to finally commence. During the official civil dispute hearing, my parents continuously performed their rehearsed theatrical roles as impoverished elderly victims who were maliciously deceived by their own highly successful biological daughter. They shamelessly demanded a massive monthly financial compensation package to somehow cover their supposedly immense emotional damages, alongside their constantly escalating luxurious living expenses. The aggressively confident plaintiff lawyer desperately attempted to construct an entirely absurd legal argument, claiming that a permanent binding oral agreement existed between us regarding my eternal financial servitude. The opposing counsel loudly proclaimed across the quiet courtroom that I had verbally promised to financially maintain them for the rest of their natural lives, in direct exchange for receiving temporary shelter during my previous corporate unemployment. He dramatically gestured toward my supposedly fragile parents while attempting to secure the maximum possible financial extraction from my personal bank accounts through this highly malicious litigation. Their lawyer boldly presented his utterly ridiculous case by stating, "My clients took her in during her hardship, so in return, she has the obligation to support them unconditionally." Without missing a single beat, Mrs. Ford immediately stood up from our defense table to aggressively dismantle their entirely fabricated narrative with absolute legal precision. She decisively replied to the opposing counsel by stating, "Taking someone in does not include the right to steal Social Security information to open credit cards and burn it all at illegal underground casinos, Your Honor." Following her incredibly powerful verbal strike, my highly experienced attorney methodically presented a massive stack of undeniable financial evidence, explicitly detailing their extensive identity fraud operations. She carefully distributed the official banking records to the bench, proving exactly how my parents deliberately accumulated colossal gambling debts under my personal name without my explicit consent. The presiding judge spent several tense minutes carefully reviewing the highly detailed credit card statements clearly showing my completely forged signatures on numerous unauthorized underground casino loan applications. His previously neutral judicial facial expression rapidly hardened into a look of absolute disgust upon fully realizing the sheer magnitude of their highly calculated parental betrayal. Finding their malicious legal claims utterly baseless and highly offensive to the legal system, the judge aggressively banged his heavy wooden gavel onto the sounding block to permanently dismiss their completely absurd civil lawsuit. The color entirely drained from Mom and Dad's faces as they instantly turned completely pale white while sitting entirely paralyzed at the plaintiff table. Their hands and feet visibly trembled in pure terror as the furious magistrate delivered an incredibly stern judicial warning regarding their highly illegal financial activities spanning across several months. The judge firmly announced his immediate intention to officially transfer the entire comprehensive case file directly to the State Criminal Investigation Department to vigorously pursue felony identity theft charges against both of them. Watching their pathetic emotional manipulation tactics completely backfire into a severe criminal liability brought me an incredibly profound sense of absolute legal vindication right there in the crowded courtroom. They had walked into this legal battle expecting to comfortably secure an effortless lifetime income stream by manipulating the justice system using their fake parental tears. Instead of succeeding in their malicious extortion plot, they were forced to slowly walk out of that quiet courtroom, facing the very real possibility of serving significant prison sentences for their undeniable financial crimes. More than a month has passed since the judge's gavel finally struck the sounding block, and everything in my life has taken a completely different direction. The local bank officially initiated the foreclosure proceedings on the lake house in Minneapolis because my parents had secretly used the property as collateral for multiple gambling loans. Since they lacked any legitimate income and had completely exhausted my personal credit lines, they were left with absolutely no way to cover the massive outstanding mortgage payments. The luxury suburban home that I had spent years maintaining with my own hard-earned money was abruptly taken back by the financial institution within weeks of the court hearing. Both Gary and Sharon were forced to pack their remaining belongings into cardboard boxes and move out onto the street while facing the harsh reality of their parasitic choices. They ended up living in a cramped and dilapidated studio apartment located in a neglected part of the city, while struggling to survive on meager government assistance. My parents now spend their days and nights living in constant terror as they await the inevitable arrival of criminal indictments for their extensive identity theft and financial fraud. While they were suffering the direct consequences of their own greed, I was officially promoted to the position of Chief Executive Officer at my firm with a substantial salary increase. I am now in full control of my financial freedom while building a peaceful new existence that is no longer burdened by their constant emotional and material exploitation. My newly renovated downtown penthouse provides a serene environment where I can finally focus on my personal well-being without the fear of someone stealing my identity or draining my bank account. I have surrounded myself with a supportive network of professional colleagues and genuine friends who value me for my character rather than my financial utility. The heavy weight of generational guilt has been permanently lifted from my shoulders as I embrace a future filled with genuine success and authentic personal relationships. Looking out over the city skyline every evening, I feel an incredible sense of pride for having the immense courage to stand up against the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Before concluding today's story, it is essential to reflect on the deeper reality of the situation that Piper had to endure within her own home. This disturbing account serves as a brutal reminder that sharing a bloodline does not grant anyone the inherent right to transform your life into their personal tool for profit. Toxic behavior remains fundamentally destructive even when it is disguised under the sacred veil of family ties, and you must never let blind filial piety become a fatal weakness that allows others to destroy your future. Establishing firm boundaries to protect your mental and financial health is not a selfish act of rebellion, but rather a necessary requirement for your own survival and dignity. The most perfect form of justice is not always about seeking direct revenge, but rather standing back and allowing people to face the natural consequences of their own choices while you flourish independently. What would you have done if you were in Piper's shoes and discovered that your parents were actively stealing your future to fund their own addictions? Would you have the same courage to pursue legal action and cut ties completely? Or would you try to find another way to resolve such a deep betrayal? If you have a different perspective, or perhaps a similar story of setting boundaries with difficult relatives, please share your thoughts in the comments below to help others in our community. We truly appreciate you staying with us until the very end of this intense journey. And if this story resonated with you, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe